Morning everybody, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to start the live feed. Can I welcome you all to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee, which is one of 3 area-based committees of Dorset Council. Our area 3 that covers the Old Purbeck District Council and East Dorset District Council areas. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Tony Coombs and I'm the chairman of this committee. I'm going to just run through the officers who are supporting us today. We have Phil Crowther as our legal advice, Kim Cowell, Principal Planning Officer, Ms Adams, Planning Case Officer, Claire Hicks, Planning Case Officer, Diana Mitsadori Curran, Planning Case Officer, Pete Waters, Planning Case Officer, Corinne Woodridge, Planning Case Officer, Chris McDermott is our Senior Housing Officer, and David Northwest is our Community Support Officer. Can I make everybody aware, please, this meeting is being live streamed and a copy of the recording of the meeting will be available on the website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed, and for the benefit of those in the room, what you see on the screen behind you is what is being sent out on the public domain. And all the officers behind the scenes will make this possible. And believe me, it's been getting it all set up today. And I'm very pleased to welcome members of the public back into the meeting. We've had 2 years of sitting isolated in our homes, trying to run the meeting, so it's very nice to see you all again. And also that those that you have already given notice are going to speak to us directly today. And the procedures for that you can see on the agenda item 4, public participation, which is page 123 on the agenda. And we will be taking all the applications in order as they are printed on the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence, David?
Yes, Chair. Apologies for absence from Councillors Dyer, Robinson and Crook.
Thank you. And I believe everyone else is here. It's good to see you. Members, are there any declarations of pecuniary or other conflict of interest, bias or predetermination in the applications before us this morning? Okay. Item 3 on the agenda are the minutes of the previous meetings. As they were held virtually, we were unable to confirm them because we didn't have any decision-making powers, and any decisions were deferred to senior officers once we had made our mind to decisions. So, officially, can we please confirm the minutes of the meetings that were held on the 28th of July 2021, 25th of August 2021, 29th of September, the 13th of October, the 27th of October, the 5th of December, the 5th of January 2022 and the 9th of February in the UK. Item 4 is public participation, and can I remind members of the public that this is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting. Those 3 members of the public, including any community or amenity group who have registered to speak for and against the application, including the applicant or their representative, a maximum of 6 in total per application, will be invited to address the committee. If the applicant or their representative registers to speak, then only the first 2 members of the public who wish to speak for the application may address the committee. Not applicable today, but MPs need to register in the same way and will count as one of the 6 speakers. Town and parish councils and all members of the Dorset Council who are not members of the committee and who wish to address us will be allowed to speak, provided they have given due notice. All requests to speak have to be registered with Democratic Services by 8:30 AM on Monday this week. Each speaker will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. David, are there any representations from the public that do not relate to matters on the agenda today?
No, received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So, 5 applications before us today. The background information relating to them has been available for inspection by members prior to the meeting, and that covers consultations, objections, representations, as well as the East Dorset and Purbeck local plans and the council's related policies. I will invite the case officer to introduce their item. Members of the public, planning agents, applicants and town and parish councils who have registered to speak will be allowed to address the committee. And I'll ask you to come forward to the desk and I'll explain that as you get there. So Those that have registered to speak will be allowed to address us in the following order: public against the application, public in support, the applicant or agent, the town or parish council, and then local member. Following the public participation section of every item, I will then ask the officers if there are any salient points that they wish to clarify. I will then open up the floor to members for questions and debate. In order to run the meeting, may I request the members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through myself as chair, and I will invite you to speak in turn. As we have gone through before the meeting, can you please ensure that your microphones are on mute and that your device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality? We have 2 room mics on the floor in front of my desk here, now picking up what is being said in the room. At the end of the debate, I will take the vote by show of hands as we always used to, and the voting details will be recorded in the minutes if 3 or more members make the necessary request. So we're now going to load up the first presentation, please, and that is item 6, 2021-0262, Willie Lakes Church Knoll, erect a detached self-food rural exception site dwelling. It's now an application. So, Kari is going to take us through this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application is an outline form only for the erection of a detached self-built rural exception site and a dwelling on a plot of land to the south of the bungalow that is Willie Lakes in Church Knoll. As the application is an outline form only, the principal proposal is only being considered. All other details of layout, scale, appearance, access and landscaping are reserved for approval of the zoning. The application site is located to the south of Church Knoll and approximately 1 mile from Forecastle to the west. As you can see from the site location plan, the application site is here. It's accessed by a track that runs south from the main centre of the village, and it forms part of a wider land holding as outlined in blue. The parent property of Willie Lakes, the bungalow, is to the north, and there is also a recent stables conversion to residential to the north of that. So the site, as a whole of Church Knoll, is located within the Dorset A1B. The application site lying down here is the south of the settlement boundary, which is shown in the orange curve here. It's also located outside the Church Knoll Conservation Area, which you can see in the blue curve here. And the dark shaded areas to the north here are a number of listed villages within the conservation area. In terms of other designations, there is a public right of way which runs along the access track and then continues to another agricultural fields to the south of the site. So this is just an aerial view of the site. So the site's down here to the south. And as I already mentioned, the parent property of Willie Lakes, the bungalow is to the north here, and a stables conversion here. The site's in the countryside. It's well screened by existing trees and hedgerows.
Sorry, your pointer isn't working.
Apologies for that. The site is to the south here, and to the north is Willie Lakes, the bungalow, the parent property, and just north of that we have the stables conversion, which is within the same family membership. The site is well screened to the south, east, and on further to the west by existing trees and hedgerows. And the land itself at the application site is relatively level, but it does slope off to either side to the south and here, and also to the west. So these are just some photographs of the site. So first here, number 1, is looking from the western boundary towards the eastern boundary of the site, and you can just see in the distance some of the mature trees in the hedgerow along the eastern boundary. And just here is the existing boundary fence of the parent bungalow of Willie Lakes. Photograph 2 is looking southeast, again across to the sort of well-treed boundary. Photograph 3 here is looking again to the southeast towards the well-treed boundary and agricultural fields to the south. And photograph 4 is really looking across the site itself, and you can see in the distance the tree boundary along the east. And these are some photographs that are largely looking westwards from within the site. So photograph 1 is the central northern area of the site, looking westwards. And just on the horizon here, the land slopes down, and you can see that in photograph 2. So again, it's from the western side of the site, and the land slopes down further into the countryside. And then photograph 3 here is taken from the western boundary, looking northwest. And again, you can see the existing boundary with the wider land holding. And these are just some photographs here showing you the access to the site. So the top photograph here is the view north, and the existing gated access is just to the side here, and looking northwards at the access track towards the village. And just below that is more the view south along the access track towards the agricultural field access and the gated access to the site. And then just to give you some context, the photograph at the bottom here is the related parent bungalow, which is a perfect stone construction. And the top photograph is the more recent stables conversion, which obviously has more of a functional character for its conversion. So in terms of comments on the application, there has been one letter of support and a number of objections, including objections from Church Knoll Parish Council, Dorset CPRE and local residents. A number of the objections have related to the impact of the development on the countryside and the Dorset AONB, the impact on agricultural land, and also that the proposal is contrary to the local affordable housing and rural exception site policies. They've also raised concerns about the lack of need for the proposal, and all of these comments are addressed in the remainder of the presentation. So as already noted, the application site here is within the countryside, and it's therefore subject to related policies within the National Planning Policy Framework and the Perfect Local Plan. The National Planning Policy Framework advises against the development of isolated new dwellings in the countryside, but it does support the provision of rural housing that meets local needs in the form of rural exception sites. Policies in the Perfect Local Plan also support the provision of rural housing in the form of rural exception sites, notably policy REF and the related affordable housing SPD. Therefore, whilst objections have been received from third parties and neighbours to the impact of the proposal being located outside the settlement boundary in the countryside, officers consider the proposal is acceptable in principle, and it's also in accordance with both national and local policy. So in terms of Perfect Local Plan policy REF, there are a number of specific criteria that are required to be met for a rural exception site dwelling. These are set out in more detail on pages 229 to 231 of the committee report, and I will run through them briefly now. So the first criterion is there needs to be a local need. The applicants are on the Council's housing register and have a proven close family continuous residence connection to the parish of Church Knoll, which extends over 5 years. There is no other affordable housing provision available within the parish to meet their identified needs, and the application is considered to be acceptable in this respect. In terms of location, despite the site being located to the south of the village and outside the settlement boundary, it is not considered to be physically isolated and is well screened. Whilst it's noted that village facilities and services are limited, this would be the case for any new dwelling, even within the settlement boundary of Church Knoll. So overall, whilst a more accessible location would be preferred, on balance, it's considered that the ability to provide for a local affordable housing need outweighs the level of harm that would result from service access elsewhere. In terms of the number of dwellings proposed, policy RES requires that the number of dwellings should be commensurate with the settlement hierarchy in the size of the village. The construction of a single dwelling is considered to be acceptable given the small size of Church Knoll. And in terms of subsequent occupation of the dwelling, secure arrangements are required to be in place to ensure that the rural exception dwelling remains affordable for both the current and future occupiers. This can be dealt with and secured by way of a signed legal agreement, and this will restrict both future occupancy and the resale value of the dwelling to ensure it remains affordable in perpetuity. Officers therefore consider that the proposal meets the specific policy requirements of policy RES. So in addition to policy RES, officers also have to consider whether the affordable housing provision meets the requirements of the affordable housing, affordable housing SPD. So the SPD advises that all exception sites can either be groups of dwellings or single dwellings, and the proposal for this single dwelling conforms with that. It also requires that dwellings should remain affordable in perpetuity. And as I've already mentioned, this can be secured through a legal agreement, as detailed in paragraph 1518 of the committee report. In terms of the future resale value of the dwelling, the Affordable Housing SPD provides a formula for calculation. This is shown on the current slide in front of you and is set out in more detail on paragraph 1520 of your report. This is the formula here. The application submitted was supported by a viability report, which concluded a resale value of 50.56% of the prevailing market value for the dwelling. So in accordance with policy, an independent assessment of the submitted viability report was undertaken by the district valuer. This determined slightly different costs to those put forward by the applicants in their report, and it concluded a resale value of 47% of the prevailing market value. So the NPPF has introduced new affordable housing delivery mechanisms and definitions of affordable housing, and a summary of these are included in the committee reports on paragraphs 1525 and 1526. That the NPPF includes minimum discounts of 20% and 30% below the market value. So following the SPD formula, the current proposal has a resale value of 47% of the prevailing market value, which is significantly lower than those set out in the NPPF. The applicants have agreed to this figure being secured through a legal agreement, and on this basis, officers consider the proposal will provide an affordable rural exception site dwelling, which conforms with both national and local planning policy. So, in support of the application and the related viability assessment, the applicants have submitted a number of indicative drawings, which is just on the screen for you now. I must emphasise that the plans are indicative only at this stage, and as already mentioned, all details will require future approval at the matter stage. In terms of other planning issues, the site, as already mentioned, is within the Dorset AONB, and objections have been raised to the major scale of the development within the designation. In accordance with the Affordable Housing SPD, the proposed plot size is limited to 0.1 hectares, and the dwelling size is also limited to 100 square metres. Floor area of the dwelling can be restricted by way of a condition, which is recommended condition 5 in your report. And on this basis, due to the restrictions, the proposal is not considered by officers to constitute development of the major scale. The restricted plot size, location and ownership of the adjacent land will also enable the AONB objectives to be addressed at reserved matter stage. This will enable a scheme to be achieved which will respond appropriately to the local AONB character. The public benefit of providing an affordable dwelling is also considered to outweigh the very limited harm to the AONB designation and the countryside. Officers also recommend that permitted development rights be removed by way of conditions 5 and 10, and this would limit any future development impacts on the AONB. So as already noted, the application is an outline form only, and details of the dwelling's appearance, scale and layout will be considered by way of reserved matters. The site only adjoins residential development on its northern boundary, and impacts on neighbouring community are likely to be limited. Full consideration will take place at reserved matters stage. The Council's highway engineer is raising an objection in terms of highway safety and access. Field gate access has already been installed in the western site boundary, and there's sufficient space within the plot size to enable parking provision. Again, full details for the vehicular access and parking will also be considered at reserved matters stage. In terms of biodiversity impacts, an appropriate assessment has been undertaken, and it shows that the impact of the proposed dwelling on the Dorset Heaths and Pool Harbour can be suitably mitigated in accordance with existing SPDs. Natural England have raised no objection to the proposal subject to the mitigation being secured. In addition, a biodiversity plan has been submitted in support of the application, and this has been certified as approved by the Council's Natural Environment team. Biodiversity impacts are therefore considered to be acceptable, subject to a condition of requiring full implementation of the biodiversity plan, and that's condition 9. Flood risk and drainage are also acceptable, subject to recommended condition. And the tree officer has raised no objection in principle to the proposals, but has requested a more detailed arboricultural method statement to be submitted for later consideration, and that this should be submitted with any reserved matters application for either landscaping or layout to ensure that any impacts can be fully considered. This can be considered by condition again, and that's condition 8 of your report. For these reasons, your officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions, and also the completion of the section 106 legal agreement as set out in paragraph 17 of the committee report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Clara. We also have Crystal Derby with us, who is the Senior Housing Officer. Which is there anything you want to add at this time, or do you just want to respond to the other questions that are from during the debate?
I can respond to any questions.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the public speaking element, and we have one public speaker on this application, and that's Steve Scott, who is the agent. Morning. I've got rid of a few messages before this meeting. However, the microphones are fairly straightforward. Press the button to switch on, press to switch off. You will have 3 minutes and it will be timed, and I'm going to be, because it's the first meeting back, I'm going to be really strict on timings today because we do have quite a few applications to get through. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jack. Good morning. It's the Affordable Housing SPD that provides the policy backing for the application for you today. The SPD was produced as a direct result of a clear message from the public and councillors that we needed to deliver more affordable housing in rural communities. In fact, it was and still is a corporate priority of the council, and it reflected the priorities of most, if not all, town and parish councils, which includes Church Knoll. They discuss at length in their adopted parish plan the need to, and I quote, provide affordable housing for local people so they can continue to live and work in the community. That's exactly what the applicants are trying to do. Mr. and Mrs. Smith are qualified professionals, teachers no less, with a young family who are looking to stay in their home village. They can't afford the skyrocketing house prices, and they're on the register for affordable housing need. Their family's looking to help them out by offering them a self-built plot. After the fanfare when the SPD was first adopted, there were a number of inquiries from people wishing to build their own homes, but none ever came into fruition. The reason was they were unwilling to accept a lower than market house value. That Mr. and Mrs. Smith are serious. What they get here is a dwelling fixed in perpetuity at 47% of market value, and they're happy for that to be fixed in all future resales to ensure whoever then buys it gets the same substantial discount. That's how badly they want the roof over their families' heads. To be clear, the applicants and case officer confirm there's no agricultural tie on this plot. National policy and the local plan support homes of this nature and at Church Knoll, so there's no issue in the principle of this proposed development. The policy framework requires following 4 key tests to be met. 1, demonstrated need. As we've heard today, on the register, so that's that. 2, ideally the site's not remote. It's adjacent to existing residential properties and has a few minutes walk from the centre of the village. It's well contained. True, there isn't a bus service or an abundance of facilities and services from Church Knoll, but such is the nature of a rural location. Many of the objectors to this application cite those as reasons for refusal, but ironically they're happy enough to live in the village themselves. 3, the housing will be affordable in perpetuity. It will. A legal agreement is in the final stages. And 4, to keep it affordable, the plot size should be no more than 0.1 hectare, and the dwelling should not exceed 100 square metres. The proposal falls in these parameters. In addition, there are no neighbour amenity, access, drainage, heritage, landscape, tree, biodiversity, design or scale concerns raised by any statutory consultee other than the parish council. In short, it ticks all boxes, and the application covers exactly the scenario the policy was written for in the first place. I commend the well-balanced case officer's report and recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Beautifully timed. As we're going speaker, I'm going to go back to officers. Is there anything that you wish to pick up from what we've heard from the public speaker? Thank you very much. Okay, shall now move to members. Check out there.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Two questions, really. It is covered within the conditions, and that is in terms of the tree line and the hedging. My understanding is that the area of the bill isn't actually overlooked by any higher grade. So there appear to be, not in the close proximity, that the site can be seen from a higher level. And so within the conditions, that tree line and that hedging is to remain. Can you still trust the officers that would be the case? My second one surrounds the access lane to it, surrounding how many vehicles actually use that access lane. The highways officer did say within the report that the question was answered, but I couldn't actually find it in the report, where it says that there's no objection that sustainability of the location may be an issue for further consideration. I couldn't find in the report what he was actually referring to.
Would you have to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the hedging and visibility of the site, within the sort of immediate locality, the site is very well screened, but obviously within the wider landscape, there are areas of higher site. Immediately within the locality as well, screened by the existing hedgerows and trees around it. Distant landscape, actually the development in Church Knoll into wider landscape views, and the proposed plan we see against that development. In terms of vehicle access along the lane, the site itself is we have existing dwelling and electric stables and Ruby Lakes, so there are a number of vehicles that access that. And then we also have a number of other dispersed dwellings closer to the village of Church Knoll, which use the access lane, and even closer to the village again, the village hall uses the access lane. So there are a range of vehicles that would use that access lane. The solution services are limited within the village of Church Knoll. Most of the major facilities would be for council for access to the east. And I think it's fair to say that in terms of general impact and accessibility, the single dwelling proposed here, which have no greater impacts than the single dwelling proposed within the settlement boundary of Church Knoll itself.
Thank you.
Okay, my next speaker is Alex Brunton, followed by David Turner.
My work. Through you, Chair, I'm a bit confused on this. It's in self-build. Is this actually going to be built by the resident, the applicant? Because they're teachers, just interested. So that's one question. Is it actually self-build? It kind of seems to have self-build sort of registered there. Also, I'm slightly my colleague will probably pick up on the finances of it. The public right of way, is it a right path or is it a footpath? Because I'm not sure I've actually picked up which version of it, so I should put this to you. So that would be interesting because this is a very busy holiday area, perfect, and there is a lot of walkers and such like around. So I'm just intrigued. Because this is, I assume, effectively a cart track or a farm track, and you're going to be having, somebody's going to have to be bringing in building material and such like. I wonder about the state of that track. Who is responsible for maintaining it? If it's a bridle way, it's slightly different from if it's, you know, a private road with footpath rights over it. I'm just interested in that. It may also need effectively, it could end up being widened because, you know, bigger trucks will have to go down. So that's my question. It's about ownership and rights and responsibilities of the track. What's the other bit I said? Self-build or local builder. I have no, I think that's the bits on there.
Okay, you can answer to those.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And so the application is for a self-build rural exception sign, actually stated in the application description. In terms of the public right of way, my understanding is it's a public footpath. And in terms of access and impacts on users of that footpath, then an informative note has been included in the recommendation as recommended by the public rights of way officer, which ensure that that footpath remains open and is not obstructed during any proposed development, any built development taking place.
If I may, Chair. Housing is defined in the National Planning Policy Framework as housing built by an individual or group of individuals or persons working with or for them. So it doesn't mean that people actually have to build it themselves.
Okay, does that answer your questions, or do you want to come back?
It's the ownership of the track. Is it private farm track?
Sorry, can you switch yours on?
So it's actually the ownership of the track. If it's just a footpath, then it's assumed private land. Is the ownership of the track in the ownership of the applicant or the applicant's family?
I understand the applicant.
You just do not go on the
Sorry, apologies. As I understand, the applicants aren't the owners of the track. When they submit their application form, they've undergone the process of serving notice and advertising their intention to submit an application to ensure that anybody who's potentially the owner of the tracks, because at that stage it was unknown, had the opportunity to comment on the application. So whilst they're not necessarily the owners, they have gone through the due process in advertising the application to ensure any potential owners are aware of being received.
And you won't speak in this data.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions really. It's a rural exception site, and my understanding of a rural exception site is that it's something that you would not normally get planning permission to build if it were not for the fact that it's a rural exception site. And a rural exception site has some fairly strict conditions. The one that concerns me a little bit is the proximity to the neighbourhood, because the rural exceptional sites guidance and checklist in paragraph 17 says that exceptional sites should form a logical extension to the existing village and should not be viewed as scattered development in the open countryside. And the location plan, which you can see on screen, seems to show that it's quite away from the village itself. So I hear what the officer said earlier, but I'd like to be further convinced that it is part of a coherent village, rather than just a scattered exception. And the other thing is Natural England talk about mitigation in their like what mitigation might that be? So I'd like to understand that as well, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of the positioning of the site and the village, it's obviously outside the settlement boundary, which is drawn quite tightly around the main part of the village up here. But the general character of development extending south along the access lane is quite dispersed, with a number of detached dwellings set within large plots along the access road. And then we have more recent conversion here at Willie Lakes. Policy RES of the local plan advises that generally rural exception sites should be as close to the existing settlement boundary or related as well as possible. But where there are no other sites available within that particular settlement, then more sort of isolated sites can be considered. And in this case, because of the general sort of pattern of developments and the pockets of development along the access road, and that there are no other affordable housing or reception sites available within the parish, officers consider that the development to the south here relates relatively well to the existing dwellings to the south and is considered acceptable in accordance with policy RES. So the second question was regarding mitigation. So in terms of the mitigation required by natural leaflet, that would be impacts on Dorset Heaths and Poole Harbours. So that's always secured through contributions provided through the community infrastructure levy in accordance with our policy. And the current proposal would meet those requirements, and naturally we have no objections. The other mitigation will be provided through provisions set out in the approved biodiversity plan, which will see the installation of biodiversity enhancements as the weather dwelling is constructed. So in those respects, the proposal meets biodiversity requirements.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, David?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I have no further speak. Good right. Can I just say for the benefit of people watching online that we're trying to borrow the camera this morning, so just stay with us.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the absence of Mark Short, but I can assure everyone that that is no loss to him. Thank you, Chairman. I have considerable sympathy with the circumstances in which Mr. and Mrs. Smith and their family find themselves. I can empathise with the reasons for this application, but I have a couple of concerns which I'd like to put in form two questions. First of all, have the officers given any consideration to the precedent that this will or could set in this AIB? Secondly, do we have an actual figure for the number of local residents who have objected in addition to the parish council? Thank you.
Yes, of course, thank you. And so in terms of setting the precedent in the OMB, I think we have to take into account that the National Planning Policy Framework and the Perfect Local Plan provide a policy background for this type of development as an exception to the standards of the countryside and policy. And any new application that will come into this type of development, a rural exception site within the AONB or the countryside, would have to ensure it met exactly the same quite strict policy requirements to enable an application to progress. So in that respect, I think the policy basis is there for it, and we would have to consider any future applications on their own merits, as we have done with this particular application. In terms of objections from neighbours, I believe we had 7 objections from local residents and 1 letter of support, and that was in addition to the comments received from the parish council. Yeah, that's on page 222 of the report. Yeah, so we had 1 letter of objection from CPRE, Dorset, 6 letters of objection, and 1 letter of support from neighbours.
Thank you.
Wish to come back, Bill?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the report and the questions you answered. This is back in meeting on the learning process again. Yeah, this is obviously a difficult circumstances surrounding this, and I think we're all aware on this committee of the problems that Purbeck have in providing homes that are an important measure to retain young families within the area, that history of the area. It's also a problem that that exists throughout also. Purbeck does seem to have a particular problem surrounding this and keeping those young people within the area. On page 145 from 15.17 through 15.18, 15.19, explained it as the Central meets the requirements of the perfect affordable housing policy. The site is not adversely overlooked and is within close proximity to the village. From what I can hear, it is within close proximity to the village for that element of adverse impact through sidelines cause an issue with the local countryside. There are sufficient conditions set out in future property can be retained as an affordable property, which is as the British says, desperately needs to live in that area. That's truly important. And so, on those bases, and the fact that there is no actual significant material planning issues that I think would warrant reviews on this, and then there's a balance between whether it is detrimental to the setting in the local environment, whether it is able to be passed, and for me, it is able to be passed from the council. I propose that we grant.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Alex. Do any of the members wish to speak on this? Okay, we have proposal for grant, and if you refer to your agenda, the recommendation is in two parts. So it is, so the recommendation is grant subject to completion of a legal agreement under section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990 as amended, and the form to be agreed by the legal services manager, and you've got the full details in the agenda on page 240. And then the flip to that is to refuse permission if the legal agreement is not completed on 9th of September, 6 months from the date of this committee, or such extended time as agreed by the service manager for development management and enforcement. So the grant is basically subject to the applicant signing in section 106. That is not signed, then it will be an automatic refusal. Our members very clear on that. That's been moved, the grant and seconded. Those in favour, please by show of hands. Seven, and those against? One. And I believe there are no abstentions. Everyone's voted. So confirmation, David, the result, please.
Mr. Chairman, 7 in favour.
So can you put your mic on, David?
7 in favour, 1 against.
Therefore, that is carried and the application is granted. Thank you very much. So we move on to the next application, and that is 2021-0249 Tower Hill, Bury. Demolish the existing property and erect 5 detached properties associated with parking, access and landscaping. That's on pages 159 to 179 for your areas. Just do a quick swap over, so just notice. Okay. For your patience, taking through this one is the case officer, Big Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. This is an application for the site of Tower House, Tower Hill, and Beer Regis, application reference 6/2021/0249, to demolish the existing property and erect 5 detached properties with associated parking, access, and landscaping. Just to give you the context, the site is situated in the Beer Regis. Just to break the context, it's development site. It's development site. So just get straight to this. So development site is in the northern part of Beer Regis. It's within the settlement boundary village that's situated in the northern end. So it's not an elevated part of the village outside of the historic. So just to give you further context, the site is situated within the Beer Regis conservation area. As you can see, the blue dots denote the conservation area, so it's situated right within the conservation area. As I mentioned before, it's within a prominent location. If I go back one slide, there's visibility of this site because it's animated from the southern end of the village. You can see it looking across, so it's in a prominent location within the conservation area. So here's the location plan itself. So the site is adjacent to Butt Lane and Tower Hill on here. Just take through some photographs if I may. This is the entrance to the site. As you can see at present, the entrance is largely developed, so you've got a well-established hedgerow and verge. I'm pointing this out at this point because this is quite significant in the conservation area. Tower Hill is identified within the conservation area appraisal as one of the back lanes, which is a historic medieval road network effectively running behind the primary road, which was Bus Street running through the centre of the villages. The other thing to point out, this site is it's very much a transitionary site between the more built-up part of the village and the rural edge of the village, so it's quite an important transitionary site. Taking you looking slightly to the left, we're looking down Tower Hill towards the junction with Butt Lane. We're pointing out 2 neighbouring properties there, Mowbray Barns and Poppies. We have received objections from those properties to this proposal relating to concerns about overlooking from 2 properties, which, as you'll see when we get to the site plan, will be situated. So now looking east up Tower Hill towards 1 and 2 Tower Hill. These are not opposite the site, so this is the edge of the site here, but this is just to kind of emphasise that transitionary nature from the more built up form of the village into the rural area. And so now on the site itself, you can see that the site itself is relatively level. The topography does change a little as you go towards the northern end of the site. But here we are at the southern part of the site, and as you can see from the plan, we're looking from east to west. It's worth noting that actually Butt Lane is down here. You can't see it, and the site is quite significantly on a higher plateau than Butt Lane itself. So in terms of height, the AAD height, the site is 57 metres, and Butt Lane at the junction of Tower is 51, so it's about a 6 metre increase over a very short distance. So this is the existing property, Tower House. it is identified in the conservation area appraisal as a neutral contributor, which means that it could be replaced with a suitable replacement of suitable quality. Now we're looking towards the north of the site, so townhouse is here on the left. In the distance is Hillbutt, which, if you look at this plan, is the property beyond the boundary of the site. As you can see, the topography area level does rise slightly towards the east, but not significantly, not certainly in comparison to the drop down to Butley. Just looking back across. This is to the rear of the townhouse. Again, just to give context, these buildings have been demolished, so you have the house and existing annex. Now we're looking west towards Butt Lane, so I think the change in topography is probably more noted here because you can see the roof ridges of the properties within Butt Lane. As I said, there's about 6 metre change, which is reflected in the fact that what you see from the sites of the roof ridges of the neighbouring properties. So we're now further up into the site towards the northwest. So again, the context is the Hillbutt, which is just to the north of the site, and we're looking into the northwest. Again, as the site, as the area starts to transition from a more urban build to a more rural one. Finally, into the northeast corner of the site, this tree has been retained as part of the proposal, but it is the only significant tree on the site. Now down Butt Lane itself, looking north from the junction of Town Hill, which is just out of shot here. You can see that Butt Lane itself, at the southern end of Butt Lane, you have the kind of more historic core of the village, and the further you go up, the more you get into more modern development. And so this is the context again, showing the difference in levels here. So this is townhouse. See behind that tree there, and this is property on Butt Lane, so you can see the significant change in topography. And this photograph is taken towards the northern end of Butt Lane, looking back towards what would be the northern end of the site. So you can see there's the neighbouring properties here, and the northern end of the site is about here. That there is the tree, which I pointed out in the previous photograph. So just to give some context of this site, there have been a couple of applications in and around this area. One of which may be familiar to some of the members here, 2019-0126, was an application that came before you a couple of years ago for 2 dwellings. This isn't on the same site, this is immediately to the west, so using this location plans to your application, but it's this site here. And the application was refused during to the orientation and design of the dwellings. As well as the proposed access and the amount of hard standing, it was considered there was less than substantial harm to the village conservation area. We go back a little bit further. Purbeck District Council, as was their planning committee, considered an application for the northern end of this application site. This bit forms part of the application we're considering today. The intention was to erect 2 dwellings there, which is shown here. There would be an access along the track coming across the field from Barrow Hill, and then into the properties there. Again, refused due to less than substantial harm to the village conservation area, and no public benefits away that harm. So there is some history of applications for this site that need to be borne in mind. So moving on to what's actually proposed. 5 properties proposed. Plots 1 and 2 here, 3-bedroom units. Plot 1 and plot 2 would have a floor area of 122 metres squared. Plots 3, 4, and 5, which are the ones to the rear here, all 4-bedroom units are larger. So plot 3 would have a floor area of area, sorry, of 137.1 metres squared, plot 4, 143.5 metres squared, and plot 5 will be the largest of the plots with 158.6 metres squared. Just for your reference, the blue here denotes the existing buildings that will be demolished. So you can see that there's a significant change here from one house plus an annex with the associated land, which the original boundary went to there, and there was another little site at the north end. And you're going from that to a site with 5 properties on, so there's a significant change to the character of the area. So running through each of the proposed units, plot 1, 3-bedroom dwelling, looking at walls which would be brick rendered, slate effect tiles on the roof, black UPVC rainwater, sockets of the fascias would be white UPVC, and the joinery would be painted white. Moving on to plot 2, also a 3-bedroom unit. You're looking at finished bond brickwork, plain slate effect tiles on the roof, and UPVC rainwater goes black again, and UPVC sockets and fascias, and painted joinery. On to plot 3, this is one of the 4-bedroom dwellings, rendered and brick walls, slate effect tiles. Moving on to plot 4. Again, walls, facing brickwork, and roof plain tiles. And then plot 5, plots 4 and 5 are both 4-bedroom dwellings, finished bond brickwork with plain effect tiles. It's worth pointing out that the Council's Design Conservation Officer was consulted on the proposal given its location in the conservation area and has raised no objection to the design of these houses. It doesn't consider that they would be inappropriate in the context of the conservation area. So here's a street scene for you. So we're looking effectively, this is the view from the property, the Poppies, which is the neighbouring property, across Tower Hill, so you're looking across, and then here's a really indicative view. Obviously, this isn't to scale, but it gives you an idea of what we'll be looking at. I think the key thing to point out here is the quite significant change in character going from a very transitionary rural character where you've got the hedgerow retained, you've got that verge, and although the houses there actually is barely visible from Tower Hill itself, and what you've got instead is a much more suburban feel. So you've got the 2 properties on the front, highly visible. There's some greenery at the front, some amenity space, but it's much more formal than the arrangement we have at the moment. And again, just to re-emphasise the point that these back lanes, their kind of their rural characteristics are part of what makes them important in the conservation area. So when we're considering impact on conservation area, our starting point is National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 199, which says when considering the impact of the proposed development on the significance of the designated heritage asset, which in this case is the village conservation area, great weight should be given to the assets conservation, and the more important asset, the greater weight should be. And this is irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, total loss, or less than substantial harm to its significance. So the NPPF defines harm in 3 terms. Total loss is very substantial. Substantial harm is the most significant end view, except for total loss. Less than substantial harm is less significant harm, but still harm. And it's important that the NPPF guides us in saying that we have to give great weight to assets conservation, irrespective of the level of harm that would be caused. Moving forward, where a development proposal leads to less than substantial harm, which is your officer's consideration here, the asset should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. So the NPPF gives us a test to work with if it's considered that less than substantial harm is caused by proposed development, then the harm has to be weighed against the public benefits of the development proposal being put forward. So looking at why this is considered less than substantial harm, as I've mentioned, Tower Hill is a rare example of surviving backplane dating to the period. The character is principally derived from the banks, hedges and soft landscape and their relationship with the owning of surrounding the village. As I've kind of tried to point out throughout the presentation, the site is a transitional site from to rural. As I mentioned, the density of development at present is very low, it's much higher density development proposal. So on that basis, your officer's advice is that this proposal would cause less than substantial harm to the village conservation area, which brings us back to paragraph 202 of the NPPF, because we then have to consider other public benefits that outweigh that harm that is caused. So the applicant has put forward a suggested public benefit which they consider would tilt the balance in favour of the development, and that's the possibility of widening the road. So if you look at this plan here, I think you can see there's a red line going down there that demarks the site outline, and at present the road follows the site outline, and at present it's 3.5 metres wide. And the applicant is proposing within the boundaries of their sites to widen the road to 5 metres. The highways team have been consulted on this. They raised no objection to the widening of the road, but they did make it clear that if the applicant wasn't offering this as it's about road causes severe harm to highway safety, and therefore they do not object to the proposal, regardless of whether the road is being to be widened or not. That being the case, officers considered that while undoubtedly this does constitute a public benefit, the weight that you can give to that public benefit is somewhat limited, given that if they weren't offering this public benefit, the highways would not be objecting to this. And it is also worth bearing in mind and noting that by widening the road, intrinsically that will cause additional damage to the character of the conservation area. So by the nature of providing this benefit, you're actually causing further harm. So that being the case, in conclusion, although the political development is acceptable, the site is within the settlement boundary, the proposal is considered to cause less than substantial harm to the village conservation area, and that's not by merit of design, that's by merit of the number of dwellings that are proposed on the site and that increased density, so changing the character of the site from being semi-rural to something much more suburban. There are adjacent listed buildings on Butt Lane. There's not considered to be any harm to their character. The impact on neighbouring community, I picked up on this briefly in the presentation. I'm conscious that there have been objections from the neighbouring residents across Tower Hill in terms of concerns about overlooking and sort of knowledge. The permit design guide suggests that when you've got back-to-back windows overlooking, there should be a 21 metre distance. That doesn't apply when we're considering properties across the street. And actually, if you were to drive around the Regis, you'll see that relationship repeats to pipe quite often, and so that's not considered to be unacceptable. Although the properties on Butt Lane are at a lower level, the proposed dwellings are set back enough that they won't be overbearing on the properties on Butt Lane, so that relationship is also considered to be acceptable. In terms of access and parking, there are no concerns about the access. Existing access to be utilised, and that's considered to be suitable. Drainage is considered to be acceptable. In terms of biodiversity, compensation for loss of habitat would be required. This would require a Section 160 agreement, which has not been prepared at this time. Therefore, officers recommend the planning committee refuse the application due to less than substantial harm to the village conservation area, which is not outweighed by the public benefits. The second reason for refusal is a more technical one, and that's that the biodiversity compensation has not been agreed. That's one that we have to consider because we have to state that it's a reason for refusal that could be overcome by Section 160 legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We'll now go on to the public speaking. Our first public speaker is Peter Morrison. Okay, we have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have also been asked to speak on behalf of our neighbours, Sean and Rob Mason of the Poppies, Carol Chris from 3 Tower Hill, and John and Jackie Ahern from 74 West Street. So our properties, the Poppies and Meadowview Farm, directly face plots 1 and 2 of post development. Plots 1 and 2 will stand just 9 metres away from Meadowview Farm and the Poppies, according to the plan officer. They will also sit higher, so will be overpowered and have direct line of sight into our properties from their front kitchen, sink window, lounge and bedrooms. That means a direct view into our landing with access to bedrooms and bathroom, while for the Poppies, the new occupants would see directly into their front room and upstairs bedroom. The perfect district design guide has said the minimum recommended distance between buildings with windows facing back to back on a similar level is 21 metres. This may be reduced provided this does not result in significant loss of neighbourhood privacy in the following cases. Areas of established high density where 2 buildings are sufficiently offset that directly overlooking is avoided, where elevations lack openings, and where elevations contain non-habitable rooms with obscure glazed windows. It's clear that none of these factors apply in this case. In its response, the Parish Council says we would highlight the potential for overlooking due to the window of new properties at the front of the development facing towards the Poppies, and would like to see the plans amended to alleviate this problem. Our other main objection is the destruction of natural hedgerow along Tower Hill, highlighted in the report from the Design Conservation Officer. The wording of the report says this considers to cause less than substantial harm. We would strongly suggest that it would cause serious and irreparable damage to the unique environment, nesting birds and other wildlife of the Tower Hill back lane. There is considerable concern expressed by all residents around the increase in traffic and additional parking requirements. The proposed widening of the road by just 1.5 metres will still make it difficult for cars to pass, let alone vans and heavy goods vehicles. We already have damage to our boundary and this will only increase, particularly during the 21-month construction delivery timetable quoted in the economic viability assessment. The proposed development will put more pressure on parking in Butt Lane and the bottom of Tower Hill, and we believe the access roads and hard standing sloping down to Tower Hill will create significant risk of flow-off and potential flooding for facing properties during heavy rainstorms. Finally, I've been asked by all our neighbours to stress that the development is not in the Fair Regis neighbourhood plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We did have a second member of the public who wished to speak. You're very welcome to turn to say. Patrick Hampton, can I just double check if Mr. Hampton is in the room? He did originally request to speak, but due to age and other issues, did not feel confident in joining us this morning. So he did send in a 450-word deputation, which meets our rules for remote meetings. So I'll read out his deputation. Item 1, traffic. 5 houses with 3 or 4 double bedrooms, totaling 36 bed spaces, are accessed from Tower Hill. The total of 11 parking spaces is inadequate for anticipated house buyers. 2 or more cars per house may be expected and at least 5 visitor spaces. There is no available parking on Tower Hill, which is a 2-way single carriageway, no footway road, nor in over part congested West Street. Egress is via West Street from Snow Hill and Butt Lane. Both have accessibility and visibility difficulties. Snow Hill, a single carriageway 2-way road without footpaths, has dangerous sight lines to West Street, frequently obscured by trucks unloading to the shop or pub and parking on each side of the street. West Street, near the Butt Lane access, also suffers from parking problems. West Street is sometimes an alternative route for the A31, A35 traffic when either roundabout is blocked. Although widening of Tower Hill has been accepted in principle, no plans show this. It is not possible to see how the road can be widened to 2 lanes for just 50 metres, whilst remaining a single carriageway for the remainder, without an adverse impact on road safety. Townscape. Tower Hill is part of a rare example of a surviving network of medieval backlanes of considerable historical significance. A major contributor to the character of the settlement with a hard urban edge and soft rural transition to the District Council proposal studies of the conservation area and the British landscape character. Tower Hill, with its crown of trees, housing clustered around its lower slopes, is a dominant feature unifying the village. It is critical townscape, providing visual coherence to the village from within in all its approaches. The overbearing position and anodyne design of this development will irreparably damage these qualities. History and heritage. Much history and archaeology exists nearby. Pre-medieval villages, Bronze Age barrow and earthworks around Barrow Hill. Bronze Age burial urns were discovered in 2006 in the only excavation of this area. Other artefacts have been found. The site and adjacent field were used as an archery range and butts by local militia circa 1405, giving Butts Road its name. The investigation ought to be carried out on the site before construction to avoid loss of any archaeology from the site. Privacy and overlooking. Distances between the houses in the development to number 3 Tower Hill and the poppies are about 11 metres. The accepted minimum distance between facing habitable rooms and building length is 21 metres on the flat, increasing considerably with the difference in level like here. Unacceptable problems will be caused by this and a cliff-like change of level between the site and above-known properties. All these problems need resolving. Conclusion. Objection to all the above reasons. Okay, so we have one member of the public in support of the application, and that's Susie G. Is she here this morning?
I did send an email last night. She unfortunately sick, so I sent an email through her deputation to Mr. Northover to read out.
No, I'm not really aware of that.
There's Jonathan Black.
Yes, he's the question. Okay, I think for the smooth running of the meeting, while that deputation is found, I'm going to ask the agent, Josh Moore, if you'd like to come forward and give us your deputation, and then we'll go back to the meeting.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of this planning application. I hope that you're able to agree that the objection from the Council's Conservation Officer is not of such weight and significance that the application should be refused. Should, however, you agree with the Conservation Officer, I trust that, as supported by the Parish Council, you'll agree that the provision of the passing day is a significant improvement in terms of highway safety, and this will outweigh the limited harm to the conservation area that has been set out in the objection from the Conservation Officer, and that you're able to approve this application. The substantial public benefit that is the introduction of the passing place along the front of the site is an opportunity that only this development can realise. It is important to note that the passing place is not required to make the development safe in highway safety terms. It is an opportunity to improve the layout of the highway for all users of Tower Hill, i.e. it's the benefits rather than being mitigation. The provision of this passing day can only be seen as a very substantial public benefit to highway safety, traffic flow and manoeuvring along the lane of Tower Hill. A detailed analysis of the comments from the Conservation Officer identifies that the alleged less substantial harm from the proposal relates only to the characteristics of the conservation area and not the setting of the listed buildings. The less than substantial harm does not dilute or compromise the integrity of the conservation area, and you've seen that planting is retained to the front of the site. Indeed, the Conservation Officer has himself stated that there is no objection to the principle of development. And as you've heard, the Conservation Officer does not object to the design and materials of the proposed dwellings. The site is within its assessment bound of the Beer Reaches, and as such, the principle of development, with the start being a sustainable location, is firmly established and supported by your policies. The harm identified for the conservation area is less than substantial harm, which is the category at the lower end of the scale. Government guidance allows any identified harm to be overcome by public benefits, in this instance, the provision of a passing way. In terms of density and the existing assessment pattern, proposed dwelling sits comfortably on the site and will respect the existing rhythm of development. Something that was not related in the opposite presentation is that to the east of the site is an allocated site within the Beer Reaches neighbourhood plan. So there is proposed development surrounding the site in the full mixed context. It's particular note that the neighbourhood plan describes a housing density of 30 dwellings per hectare on its allocated sites. The proposal before you is of a density of 16 dwellings per hectare, and this results in a spacious layout, provision of private community spaces for each property, and clearly this just approved development, perhaps the loose arrangement of built form that exists within the wider area. Members, I hope you're able to support the application and recommend approval, and to confirm that the applicant is happy to complete section 106 agreement to secure the required habitat mitigation improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm now going to go back to the author to read the deputation from CCG, which was received by me last night.
Thank you, Chairman. From CCG. I believe that although none of us like change, it's important that new homes are built in near regions. I do think that there are certain areas in our village that it will be a shame to see properties on, but this site is not this one for a small development. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense to oppose this. The site already has a property on it, and therefore it makes sense to build there. It's a vast area. Surely it's better to build smaller properties for more people than one big house, which is the current situation. Unlike other plans for properties in the village, this site will not be overlooked, and it's not somewhere people love to walk or where people have previously had allotments. Not many will even know about the land behind it. It will not be a eyesore or inconvenience for any neighbouring properties. I have been on the site and have been assured that these properties will be well designed and will reflect the character of their regions. Anyone living near Tower Hill will know that it's difficult for cars and developers have told me that they are going to put in a passing bay, which will greatly help with road and highway safety for all of us who use Tower Hill. Many of us in the village have children who, when they settle down, want the same upbringing they had. My daughter included, who now is bringing up her two children here. We need affordable properties for these young parents. We have a lot to offer as a village, including a brand new school and lots of activities going on for old and young. It would be lovely to think of families living in these properties helping and serving the community. In conclusion, I'm not concerned at all about these properties being built up behind our building. As I said before, there are areas in their regions already set for new builds, and I know they will affect people's new situation in their house prices. However, this site will not affect anyone in any of these ways. A bit maybe whilst they're being built, but a nice little group of houses in keeping with the character of being regions uptown the hill. If everyone is being honest, it's not going to affect any one person or financially. It will become the norm for the village as other areas of new properties have. These are my thoughts. I've been living in here regions 20 years and bought 4 children here. My garden backs onto the site, as do my neighbours. That's Susie King's
Thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to our next speaker, and that's Jonathan Blackmore, Widening Project Architect.
Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. The only reason why we are here today is due to the Conservation Officer's perception that the infilling of the front of the site adjacent to Tower Hill results in less than substantial harm to the conservation area, and that the proposals do not provide enough of the public benefit to outweigh this harm. The Conservation Officer advises that the design materials of the proposed dwellings are in keeping with the conservation area, and therefore the only reason this application is not recommended for approval is our response to the question, what is the public benefit? I am the lead designer of the project and also a former resident of Bear Regis. It is my opinion that early engagement with the parish council helps to understand and address any concerns that they may have with the site and helps to guide our proposals. Having discussed the site and the surrounding area with the parish council, they highlighted the neighbouring site, which they opposed, but gained the planning officer's support, but did not gain approval at committee in 2020. We draw on this comparison to show how we positively responded to the parish's concerns with our designs. The main concerns were the height and prominence of proposed houses on the neighbouring site, though importantly not infilling Tower Hill. Taking the parish's concerns on board, we worked to alleviate these by lowering the front 2 properties to reduce our overall perceived height and prominence. These considerations, the site layout and house designs, are supported by the parish.
We met the second planning officer dealing with this project on site in October 2021 to discuss the proposals. This meeting was following the Conservation Officer's comments where the need for a public benefit was first raised. I posed the question to the officer, what is a public benefit? Which was met with a shrug of the shoulders and a comment of, it's hard to say. The officer has advised, in his opinion, that the passing place and provision of additional housing are not considered to be sufficient to outweigh the concerns raised. He has never offered a suggestion, solution or compromise, even after countless emails and discussions, which is contrary to the officer engagement that the NPPF requires. There is no definitive guide on what a public benefit is, but surely this is something for the public or all their representatives to decide. So, councillors, what is a public benefit? We have asked the parish and the ward councillors who are representatives of their local community, and they have agreed that the proposed passing place is a public benefit that only the applicant can provide. Our hope is that you, the members of the committee, agree with us, the parish and the ward councillors, that the public benefits and much needed good quality family homes that are proposed by the scheme do outweigh the perceived less than substantial harm caused to the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our last public speaker is Councillor Ian Benson on behalf of Berwick Parish Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Ian Benson from Berwick Parish Council, and I was the lead chair of the production of the Beer Regis neighbourhood plan, which was adopted, as you may be aware, in 2019 by Dorset Council. The Beer Regis Parish Council is strongly in favour of this development for a number of reasons. The first of which is that the Beer Regis neighbourhood plan, rather differently from many others that have been produced, was very, very firmly in favour of additional development in Beer Regis. We approved 120 properties, indeed, one of which was just to the east of this development, this proposal, which is in front of you today. This proposal is not in the neighbourhood plan, but it abuts it, and we look forward to receiving an application for that site just to the east of this application. We believe when the right proposal comes forward, it will fit very nicely with the proposal in front of you today. The neighbourhood plan, secondly, does support infill development. We always wanted not just what we defined in the neighbourhood plan, but any suitable developments to come forward in the village if possible, because we have a very strong and stated need for additional housing in the village. The highway widening and the provision of a passing place, we believe, will add significantly to safety and indeed to the issues that many residents express and face with the passing of particularly large vehicles in that very narrow lane. We believe that a highway widening is a very significant and substantial benefit. So we believe that the additional housing expressed very strongly in our neighbourhood plan, and we believe that the widening of the highway outweigh the less than substantial harm that is the matter under discussion this morning, and we would therefore strongly support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had quite a few speakers this morning. I'm going to go back to officers. There's an awful lot that you've heard. Is there anything that you wish to respond to before I open the floor to members?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try and pick up on a few of the something like this. Trying to pick up on a couple of the points about the road widening. It's in your officer's report that it's accepted that this does constitute a public benefit, but the question is what weight should that be given? How much of a benefit is it, and is it acceptable to cause less than substantial harm to the conservation area to achieve that benefit? And your officer recommendation is that the level of the public benefits of road widening, while welcomed, isn't sufficient to outweigh the harm being caused. Bear in mind, bearing in mind that NPDF 199 makes it clear that we should give great weight to the conservation of a designated heritage asset, which means this is a very just conservation area. So I don't, officers aren't disputing that there is a degree of public benefit from this road widening. That's clear in the officer report. But the question is how much weight should that be given? And your officer's recommendation is that the weight that should be given isn't sufficient to outweigh the harm that's being caused. If I can skip back to show you one of the plans, there's been reference to the allocated site neighbouring to the property, neighbouring to the application site. So it's probably worth just pointing that out to make it clear. Let me just find the best plan to show this to you. So skip that through. Right. So it is shown here, but I don't know how clearly you can see that in purple. Yeah, I hope that's clear to everyone. That is the allocated site, so that is allocated in the very just neighbourhood plan for 3 dwellings. I think the thing to point out here is that although the site's allocated, the layout is not defined in the neighbourhood plan. We don't have an application there, so maybe there's opportunities to deliver that site potentially without causing the same degree of harm. And this. In this instance, we're looking at the layout of that. The concern of the conservation officer is the proposed layout of the development. It is quite regimented, it's quite suburban, and you therefore you lose that transitionary character that you have at the moment where at the moment, if you're driving up Tower Hill, it wouldn't immediately be obvious that there's a house there until you get to the access point, and you're losing that character. Just yeah, so the number of parking spaces was raised. The number of parking spaces provided is in accordance with the residential parking survey. So the parking is shown here. So you've got 11 spaces for 5 dwellings, which is absolutely fine in terms of the board does inform residential parking study. So there's no reason that this application won't be granted that people would have to park on the road. So there was a discussion about housing. One of the comments was to provide housing for villages, which is correct and to be taken into consideration. It's worth noting none of these are affordable, so it will be open market housing. It's just worth making that clear as part of this. This falls below the threshold for the provision of any affordable housing, unfortunately. For now, I think that's probably what we'd like to say. Thank
you very much for clarifying those points. My first member speaker is Alice Brenton.
I'm sorry, I was going back to things I didn't. Am I there? Am I on? Yes. Yeah. Hi. Yes, and I have apologies for that. I was flipping back and looking at another page of the report. I have to admit that this is an area I know quite well. I drove up Tower Hill yesterday on my way back from work, just reinforcing myself. This business is the narrow back lanes business. And yes, they are lovely. If I was wandering around in a floral dress, with a basket of flowers, it would feel lovely. But you then have to dodge cars coming towards you, they're coming home. It is an access road. There are a lot of houses in this part of the Regis. Perhaps not in this 20 metres or so. But there's people are coming home, going on to Boswell's Close, which is a modern development, a bit further on. This is an access road for people who live there, not people who lived there in the 19th century. So I think being able to pull in, go past the pedestrian without them having to jump into the brambles would be a great public benefit. I have some concerns about this site because plot 1 and 2, it's difficult to judge with its scale because when you're actually there is quite a rise. It would have been nicer, to my mind, if there had been more like a terraced effect, so it looked more like the buildings on the other side of the road. And I am intrigued to know how this bank is going to be sort of converted into a front garden, because it's quite a bank. But at the moment, this is a sort of dead place. The house up there, I mean, with all respect to people who live in townhouses, it's not that exciting a building. You can hardly see it from the road. In fact, you have to walk past carefully to realise it's there. There will be an issue looking from the bypass across to these houses because they probably will be visible. But houses are visible. You can't hide them forever. We do need houses. We need houses inside villages if possible. Beer Regis is a village that is going to grow. There are other plans ahead coming on as well. So I think in a couple of years' time, people would forget that these were new houses. And so I am thinking that this is a worthwhile use of a relatively empty site. And we want to maximise use of space inside or close to villages. So I am, at the moment, I'm in favour of this, unless somebody else wants to persuade me otherwise.
Thank you very much. Can you turn your microphone on, please, Alex? My next speaker is David Took, and then I've got Shane Butler.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to understand more the relationship between this proposal and the Beer Regis neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan identifies the development site at Tower Hill, but I don't think it's actually this site. And it also identifies a little further down within the community services and facilities area, a site where it's proposed there be some local green space, which I believe is actually on this site, or just to the north of it. But I'd like to understand that relationship and perhaps what might have happened to this local green space proposal within the Beer Regis neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
You wish to respond directly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just I'm taking you back to this slide, which is taken from the neighbourhood plan. So I'm actually apologies, I can't find whether I'm zooming this in, so please bear with me. But if you can see where my red pointer is, just above that is a site outlined in purple. Now that is the allocated site from the neighbourhood plan. That is immediately to the east of the site, so it bounds this site, but this site is not within it. The green open space is shown, so the northern part of that field that is in the allocated site will not be developed and kept as green open space, and the sound is proposed beyond that. So none of those proposals in the neighbourhood plan would be adversely affected by this development. It wouldn't remove the green open space, and it's adjacent to the allocated site. I mean, that's this one is not an allocated site.
Did that answer your questions, David?
To a degree, yeah. I think it's worth knowing. The neighbourhood, I think neighbourhood plans are important. They need to be very carefully drawn up, and they need to be very carefully looked at by planning officers when we do get applications. And this application is sort of adjacent and nearby, but it doesn't actually seem to fit with what the neighbourhood plan says. So I'm slightly concerned about it on that score. I did have one other query, which was the site's actually raised, In terms of drainage off the site, is there a potential for water runoff or water seepage through and then coming off onto the Botland and Tower Hill roads? Because there will be additional hard standing that will rush water off rather than to be absorbed into the ground. I just wanted to explore that as well. Thank you.
Ms. Lopez.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so conversations have taken place with the drainage engineer, and as a result of those conversations, the applicant has passed a significant filtration test to demonstrate that the land could accommodate a drainage scheme. Those infiltration tests have been done, and the drainage engineer has confirmed that they're happy with that. So there is no concern from the drainage engineer that a suitable surface water drainage system can't be achieved on this site. The details haven't been provided at this stage, but certainly we were confident that the ground can accommodate it. So therefore, there shouldn't be any issues with surface water runoff, which is why in the conclusion it was not raised as a reason for refusing the application.
Is there anything else you wanted to improve for? Okay, I'll move on to the next speaker, Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 172 of 15.23. Where in this report it makes reference to privacy and nothing. I've got a concern about this layout of the site. So it also makes reference to Mill Street, the property on each side of the road facing the road. I've got no idea how Mill Street was built. My concern with this is the layout is, could you also just tell me what is the meterage between the properties that already exist on the lane and the what's 1 and 2, I think it was, that were on the post-development site? I have an issue with developing the site, like an issue over the possible privacy, and overlooking aspects of the applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the two properties opposite blocks 1 and 2, the properties in the barn. The distance between their front boundary and the site is 9 metres, and then there's another 2 metres of properties themselves, so it's 11 metres from the front wall of blocks 1 and 2 to the front wall of the properties in the barn, and in between that you've got Tower Hill, the lane.
That answer your question?
It does, Madam Chairman, and I think I'll take my comments from the debate.
There's no from everyone. Can you stand here because we have the microphones earlier?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll say these both points I've got to the debate.
Looks like you're open today.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As I read in the report, that this area is accepted for development, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's very close within compliance of the village. I see no issues in actually developing the site. However, I do have a concern over the layout of the applications in front of the moment, for the reasoning that I've already said, that the privacy issues concerning existing properties that are already on the edge of the lane. I think that we're here to actually create good planning and bring good planning forward, and not to impact on residents that already living in properties that already exist. It could be impacted on decisions moving forward. And I think the issue over privacy with this, and only a 9 metre and an 11 metre, the additional 2 metres, given 11 metre distance between the two, I think is too close in my view, because there is the ability to reconfigure the development plot to accommodate those concerns that I've got. I also think the site's not constrained, possibly too many properties on it. Proposal.
Language, it would be a wise idea.
Madam Chair. I think concerning the issues that I've raised, I would go with the opposite recommendation to reduce, Madam Chair.
Is there a seconder? Good morning.
Good morning.
You will need a microphone.
I'll be happy to second that.
You haven't spoken to all the debate. Is there anything you wish to add to the debate?
Could you say again, please?
Is there anything you wish to add to the debate, as you haven't spoken on this item yet?
I've listened to the debate and I've listened to the officer, and I think that he's quite correct in what he's done.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do any other members wish to speak to the proposal on the table? Alex, you wish to come back, and David.
Yes, I feel that, I know it's always said you can only respond to the application on the table, and the wish list is all very well, but that's not. If we refer, if we refuse this application, we will just be sitting here in a year or so's time looking at a slightly amended version. I think there are enough conditions in place. You can't change topography. There are going to be houses higher than on the other side of the road. Tower House is considerably higher than the other side of the house. If the problem with this application is to do with distance of buildings apart, that wasn't flagged up in the report. What was flagged up in the report is whether or not the widening of a road, which is an access road to many properties, it's not just a general little meander into the woods. Is that a benefit or not? That was what the officer brought up. It wasn't to do with spacing of houses. I just feel that we could be jumping onto the wrong bandwagon.
Thank you.
I'm trying to be diplomatic these days.
Victor, people just wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair. My concern on this, again, as I mentioned earlier, the neighbourhood plan. And on page 15 in the neighbourhood plan, it says that sites that adjoin the conservation area need to be designed sympathetically to reflect local architecture. Use of traditional materials will be encouraged. Development in both Tower Hill and North Street need to respect the linear form of development. This is apparent through such areas. I don't believe that this cul-de-sac, which is essentially what we're talking about, represents a linear form of development. Again, I don't think it quite fits with respect to the approach council. I don't think this application quite fits what the neighbourhood plan was saying. And I think Alex is quite right. It may well be that in the future a different proposal will come forward, which is better designed. That was I would oppose this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does you want to come back?
So Madam Chair, there's more point of clarification raising sort of adding an additional reason for refusal in terms of the impact on the neighbouring properties, just clarity.
Go back to the proposal.
Really, Madam Chair, so the reasons for refusal sets out in your recommendation refer to the impact on the conservation area, make no reference to the impact on neighbouring residents. Is that something that you would like to see as a reason for refusal added?
That is the reason that it's the impact on the privacy of the already existing neighbouring community. It's not, but the height, that's really check. with this distance, and we get it something short of 36 feet distance, which I think is far too small on a application site where with some careful layout that could be, I think.
Thank you. As secretary, are you happy for that extra reason?
Quite happy, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So I don't see any other members indicating to see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think that the
Sorry, Gary, did you turn your camera on as well?
I don't think the 11 metres is between the pippins and the front site, in my view, is a particular problem. The less potential harm to the conservation area, I think, I don't think it's that's a particular problem. I see that from the gentleman that spoke earlier, he's from the Parish Council. Parish Council is very supportive of this application. I think providing a 106 agreement is prepared and signed by the applicant, I'm quite happy to support this, and I'm proposing approval.
Okay, I cannot accept a proposal to approve because I had a proposal to table for refusal which has been seconded. When that vote has been taken, depending on the outcome, we'll then come back to you. Now, there are no other speakers. In that case, I will go to the vote. The proposal is to refuse as per the officer's recommendation with an additional reason for refusal of the building-to-building distance between the proposed and the existing. So can I see by show of hands those in favour of refusal? Four. Okay. And those against refusal? That's 4. So therefore, it falls on me as chairman for the casting vote, and I'm going to go with the officer's recommendation for refusal. I don't think that the site is immune from development, but I don't think this is the right approval, or the right design. So we will see something come back in due course. Thank you. We shall move on to our next application. One is on 2021 04823 7 Stanbarrow Close, also very Regis. Proposed single stroke 2-story extension to rear elevation, extension of side boundary wall for youth pedestrian access. Edit is going to be taking us through this one.
This application is a flood planning committee. The applicant is an employee of Dorset Council in planning. And I have judged that the triggers in the Constitution are met. The proposed is by a single and 2-story extension to rear elevation and extension of sideline view for youth pedestrian. The site is located in the west side of Regis. The site is in an established residential area within the settlement boundary, housing dwellings which vary in the site. To the west of the site, opposite the front garden, there is public open green space and trees. The dwellings on Stanborough Place are two-storey and consist of terrace, detached and semi-detached. The majority of properties have small front gardens and off-road parking. Here we see the front elevation and the rear elevation of the site. Photo D is taken from the rear garden of number 8 Stanborough Place, looking towards the site. Number 7 is a two-storey dwelling on a relatively flat corner plot. Property is linked via the garage with number 8 Stanborough Place, which is adjacent to the southern boundary of the site. Although the majority of the boundary has a fence, there is a wall along the northern and half of the eastern boundary of the site. It is proposed to extend the wall parallel with the dwelling. Highways have raised no objections, but an important notice will draw attention to the need for any relevant highway licenses and permissions. These are the existing and proposed floor plans. The two-storey section which creates bedroom 4, the additional living area at ground floor. As you can see, the proposal is to extend the garage roof at the same pitch, following what is flexible exception, the subordinate ridge height. At the rear, the 1.1 metre deep extension would extend across the original rear gable. Although the extensions will increase the bulk of the dwelling, the property is lower than number 8, and the overall extension is not excessive. These are the existing and proposed side elevations showing how the garage roof is to be extended. To help members understand the consultee comments in the Oxford report, these are the original plans prior to amendments being made. As you can see, they included a 4 metre deep single-storey rear extension with a parapet wall which was adjacent to the boundary with number 8 Stanborough Place. This should have been overbearing when viewed from the adjacent property at 8 Stanborough Place to the south, given the height, position on the boundary, and projection to the boundary of the phase development. The occupant of that property objected, and doctors agreed that the rear projection would have been unacceptable in relation to neighbouring community. At this stage, Air Regis Parish Council did not raise an objection to the proposal. The amended plans have overturned the original concerns, as the rear single-storey extension now only be 1.1 metre deep. There will not be any requirement to navigate Stanborough Place. The proposed development would have a lower ridge height than number 8, and your officers consider that it would not cause harm to the character of the area or appear out of place in the street scene. The proposal has been designed to respect the amenities of neighbouring properties, avoiding early use for loss of light or an overbearing impact to occupiers of number 8. A new roof back window, 7 bedroom, reinstalled, closer to the boundary with number 8, as it is set further east into the plot from the neighbouring property. Therefore, it does not result in overlooking of a sensitive part of the garden to the immediate rear, and any adverse harm to the amenity of the neighbouring occupiers has been identified. Air Regis Parish Council objected to these amended plans, saying that the proposals are out of scope to all neighbouring properties. The proposed development further increased the bulk of the dwelling by can completed on the site without representing any development of the plot. It will extend the existing front picture of the garage up into the plot, the subordinate ridge height. The 2-storey element is no deeper than the existing dwelling, so not prominent in views within the street scene. The single-storey garage at number 8 and the higher ridge of that property will continue to provide visual distinction between the two dwellings. The modest single-story rear section will retain appropriate garden space and will provide visual diffusion between the existing and new elements. There's also a variety of dwelling styles in the area. The proposed extensions are appropriate and sympathetic in terms of their size, scale, and design in relation to the existing dwelling, and subject to a condition requiring similar materials, condition number 3, which have no adverse impact on the character of the area. For these reasons, the proposed bylaws and policies of the local plan and approval is recommended, subject to conditions suitable materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. We don't have any public speakers on this one. Members on your list, you will see that the applicant Naomi Macklin was due to speak, but she has withdrawn as there were no other public speakers. So, I think nobody else to report. We're straight into David, you have to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at slide 12, which is the neighbouring property to the right seems to have an extension and some changes very similar to that proposed for this site. Am I correct in that assumption? And would that be a precedent to say if that's okay? This is okay.
You can make on that, Chair. Is that I think Claire's showing here that there is actually a further property beyond the neighbour, but each property is very individual. So there's not really precedent so much as does this additional increase in the size of the property look overbearing compared to the others, and officers' opinion is that it doesn't.
Thanks. Could we just go back to slide 12 and just look at the photograph? See the picture on the bottom left? The site is the one as indicated, and there is a property immediately to its right, which appears to have an extension over the garage. It's very similar to what's proposed, isn't it? Is that misreading?
Yes, so the one with the green garage, this one here, is a property, and this one here with the red garage is number 8 on the road base. And you've got the side which includes the blue garage here.
It's a terrace.
Yeah. If you look above the green, if you look on the neighbouring, above the green garage, is that an extension or is it something else?
It's a separate house.
Separate house.
Does that satisfy your queries, maybe? I should move on to unexpected reviews.
Thank you, Chair. Can I was probably sort of considering for a minute, but what was the final opinion of the parish council on this one?
Members, the parish council didn't object to that. In summary, the parish council didn't object to the larger scheme, but when the scheme was amended to take on board the neighbours' comments, they then objected to the latter scheme, the later scheme, the one that's now reported.
So they are, this one is the one that's being objected to.
Might add that the only reason this has come to committee is because it's a member of staff. Jim Robert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the report. it's obvious that there's a conflict of properties of a visual aspect on this existing site. And I've read the officer's report, and reading through that, but it's acceptable design vision, in fact, there's no significant harm to the area, no material condition or refusal, no impact on the character of the area, it's within the urban environments of the village of the regions, and highways of no objections, proposed extensions are in appropriate and acceptable size, albeit that the neighbour, written objection, the parish council come out and review their original comments to make that objection. But I think they take into consideration of the chairman, those skills recommendation and condition for state approval.
Okay, so we have a proposal from Ron, do I have a seconder? Do I have hands? Okay, that's one, David Morgan. Do you wish to speak, David?
I think you don't. You only hear my voice, but that's probably enough. Yes, I think that all in all, I can see no objections to this. I think it's worthwhile attention on those grounds. Yes, I will second the proposal.
Absolutely, thank you. Would you like to
Of course.
It's going to be back in the room, isn't it? Okay, I have no further speakers. It's been moved for grant and duly seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, those in favour? All right, unanimous.
That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Okay, so therefore, next one is 2021 84102 Pear Nursery School, Primary First School, Glenmore Road, Ferndown, demolition of existing nursery structures and construction of a replacement nursery building. And Steve Sigori Curran will be taking us through this one.
This application relates to land owned by the Housing Council, and the application is reported to committee in accordance with council constitution. The application site is located within urban area of West Barley and within easy access to Ferndown town centre to the north. Pear Nursery School is located on land adjacent to Charlie First School and within residential area. Vehicle access to the site is from Glenmore Road, with on-site parking provided both within the school site, along the access route and in front of the site. The site can also be accessed by public footpath from Glenmore Road and Bolton Road West. That's the green path. To the southwest of the application site, separated by approximately 1.8 metre high clapboard fence, a footpath and a high hedge, is a single-storey timber building used as an additional classroom belonging to Carly First School. That's the blue building that's showing on the plan. To the northwest and west of the site are the rear gardens, the residential properties in Bolton Road and Glenmore Road. To the northeast is parking and service area to a small parade of shops with residential flats above on Glenmore Road. Photograph 1 shows the parking and mature hedge along the shared vehicle access. Photograph 2 shows parking immediately in front of the site and along the First Parley School boundary. And the photograph 3 shows the additional classroom opposite to the application site. which is the blue one on the previous slide. Pear Nursery comprises of main fabricated nurseries building with UPVC canopy to the southwest elevation, cabin and shed. Within the site, there is also a hard surface plate area towards the front of the site to the southeast. To the southeast, a small green space, later artificial grass, to the rear, towards the rear garden of the residential properties of Glenmore Road cul-de-sac, to the northwest. The proposed single-storey nursery building would be located in the same position as the building it replaces. The existing play areas will be retained. The side boundaries are screened by approximately 2 metre high closed court fencing. There are no trees or any vegetation within the side boundary. There are trees to the north-northwest corner and a mature hedge to the south-southwest outside of the boundary. The proposed replacement building is single-storey. It will be finished in European large horizontal cladding in light colour with a tilted flat roof finished in metal sheeting and will be of similar appearance as the timber building across the footpath of the southwest. The proposed replacement building will not be readily visible from the public realm and will have negligible impact on the appearance of the site or locality. The building will be appropriate in scale in relation to the existing building, even if on the true sitting and form, the proposed building will not detract from or have any adverse impact on the character and appearance of the site or for the wider area. In terms of amenities, no letters or presentations have been received from third party, and West Farley Parish Council has not raised objection to this proposal. The sitting, scale and form of the proposed building will ensure that the occupants of the neighbouring residential properties will not experience loss of light or privacy, and the proposal will not appear visually intrusive. The existing use of the site will not be changed, and the proposal is unlikely to result in an increase in noise and disturbance that would harm neighbouring amenities. Taking into account the considerations set out in the report, the application is found to accord with development plan, national planning policies and guidance. Approval is recommended subject to a condition to secure materials. Thank you
very much. We have one public speaker on this application, and that's Tina Hemmings-Stevens, who is the applicant. Thank you for your patience. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I've owned Rainbow's Elementary School, as we're in fact now known, for 15 years, since February 2007. In that time, Rainbow's End has become an important part of the West Farley community. We're rated outstanding by Ofsted, and we're currently the only outstanding setting in West Farley. We offer childcare and early years education to around 60 families per year, including those with additional needs and those in receipt of 2-year-old funding and early years pupil premium. We're very proud of our strong reputation in the local community. Almost every family that joins us now comes to us on a recommendation from other families who have used our services. We're consistently full to capacity with a considerable waiting list. The only thing that lets us down is our building. The nursery building is over 25 years old, which is about the maximum lifespan for this type of building. The building looks tired and uninviting from the outside, and it's no longer in keeping with the lovely modern buildings that are on Farley First School grounds. I've been told by several parents, usually when their children leave us to go to school, that they were initially put off from Rainbow's End by the look of the building from the outside. They always go on to tell me how happy they are that they didn't let the building stop them. from stepping inside and seeing the fantastic care and incredible learning that happens inside our nursery every day. We now need the exterior of the building to match the quality and standards of what happens on the inside. The new building we're proposing is very similar in style to the new Art School Club building in Parley First School grounds that was recently constructed just opposite us. In fact, we've employed the same company that constructed that building to build ours. Our proposed new building is the same size and sited in the same position as our existing building. The new building will accommodate the same numbers and ages of children and requires the same number of staff that we currently have. We have a business model that's been working successfully for 15 years and we have no intention of changing it. It's simply a case of swapping old and worn out for brand new. Finally, Rainbow's End is not just a business, it's part of our family. It's run by myself and my daughter, and we are committed to Rainbow's End in the long term, with the plan being that she will take over the nursery when I retire, which won't be any time soon. In constructing this new building, we're making a huge investment as a family in ensuring that we can continue to provide high quality care and education that we're known for to the children and families of West Parley for a very long time to come. Thank you.
I will ask them, I think there's anything needs to be said. Do you wish to respond to anything that's been said? Okay, in that case, I will move on to members, Alex and Aaron.
Through the chair to the officers, I assume. This all seems very good, but I'm aware that it's also very, very hard looking. And I wonder if any consideration has been or discussion has been made in terms of planting of, you've got a lot of hard landscaping and artificial plants. How permeable are the surfaces? And is there an option to actually do some more planting, or even something like a seeding roof? This is going forwards. These are young children. Anything that sort of stimulates different discussion, different ideas. I just wondered if those conversations have happened, and what eco measures are being put into the plan.
Wish to respond?
Yes, there is no vegetation on site at the moment, but there is a very mature hedge that goes right around the perimeter of the nursery site at the moment. So even though it's not within the site, there is a greenery which softens up the appearance of fencing and the building itself. The building itself is very similar to the building you can see on photograph number 3. If anything, it's smaller. The existing hard surfacing area and the green space on the back, they're going to stay as they are, they've been retained. So the proposal is literally for taking one building and replacing it with a much better, more sustainable, and for the long term use of the business. And the inside of the building also has much more space as well.
I believe there's a question about a seeding roof.
No, these conversations have not taken place. But yes, it's at the moment it's prefabricated building, so something that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may desist. This is not for a proposal to reuse a site or to change its use. It's merely to replace one building on the site with another. A high quality spec with using more sustainable materials rather than the prefabricated building that previously existed. There's vegetation around the site. It's replacing a building on the site. The application doesn't include additional landscaping. The officer recommendation is to approve the building as it stands.
Wish to come back at it. I wish to come back. I understand that it is a replacement building, but what I was hoping was that the officers were bringing up when you say about a more sustainable building, in what way? You know, we are designing for the future. So any other eco improvements, it would be lovely to have them flagged up to us.
If I may, Madam Chairman, you can see the prefabricated nature of the building on the slide that's up on the screen. The replacement building is from a modern design, and with that come the additional benefits, and as the speaker has already identified, it better meets the needs of the school and the children, and in terms of its aesthetic. But it is another prefabricated building, so it's like a cedar roof. If it had been the building that was constructed, those conversations would take place. Very aware that the building that we've been presented with, that may not necessarily be an option for a different sort of prefabrication on the site. And the application is considered acceptable in those terms, and not one where we will send for that. They require that on a timber type building.
And again, we don't have the relevant emergency policies that we would like to see in place yet.
No.
So we cannot give more weight, you know, I think your concerns are picked up. Barry, you're my next speaker.
Just make sure my picture was out there. I don't get caught up again. I mean, I think the only reason this application is before us is because the land is owned by Dorset Council. Otherwise, it would have been a decision would have been made by the officer. But basically, I mean, it's on the same footprint. I don't see a problem there. It's a modern building, and it's going to give additional benefits. So I'm quite happy to submit approval on this.
You're proposing
approval.
Is that per the officer's recommendation?
That's for the month, yeah.
Do I have a seconder? Commissioner Bartlett. Does anybody else wish to speak to this application?
Right.
That's about.
I'm thinking about the old building now. It looks 60s and 70s. Has it been checked for asbestos or anything like that? If you're going to bring it, take it down.
Mike, can you direct your comments to the chair, please?
Sorry.
There is no direct conversation with the public. The officers will be able to answer your question.
There's governance on demolition of buildings under the environmental health regarding the demolition of buildings that contain asbestos. In terms of our deliberations today, that isn't really a consideration. We often bring that to the attention of people via informative notes. If members want to add one, you're welcome to. As the applicants are in the room, they can hear that. Then there is governance for the safe removal of building that contains asbestos. That isn't considered.
Everyone.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure what about Madam Chairman. But I think that the quality of education that goes inside, if you maximise the quality of the building it contains. I mean, I spent many years teaching in 8 pubs. But I can't really appreciate it a better building. And it probably had asbestos in it as well. But I'm still here. So I totally agree that this application should go through. Good luck to the result.
Thank you very much. Let's speak with Shane Bartlett.
Chairman, I'm very appreciative that Councillor Morgan has survived many years teaching in prefabricated buildings, obviously. and I concur with Councillor Gorringe that the reason this coming for us is because it was against our own land. We are, as a planning committee, in a great position here of actually improving the lives of those young children, those nursery children, and giving them a far better establishment from which to be taught. And also improving the lives of the staff that can operate in the building. It would provide a huge benefit to the local community. And I see no reason why we would object this, and I'm fully happy to support it.
Thank you very much. I have no further speakers. It has been voted for grant and seconded. Show of hands of those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you all very much. Here we go. Our last application today is 2021-03912, Hazelwood First School, Cutler's Lane, formation of a new vehicle entrance, relocating existing pedestrian entrance, and reformation of the car parking and car park spaces, new access ramp, fencing and gates. And Elizabeth Adams will be taking us through.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Final one, and this is a second application which is before you because it is an application on behalf of the council. So, the chair has already explained the description of development, reaching, but you'll see from the photographs, it's relatively straightforward. So the application site is within the urban area of Coal Hill, north east of Liverpool, and it is at Hazelwood First School, an established educational facility, accessed from the street in Cutler's Place, approximately 80 metres south of Middle Hill Road. And the school is located north of St Catherine's Primary School, which is also in Cutler's Place. So, on my cursor is the front boundary here, along with the highway. And at the moment, there is a single access which serves the primary school and also a residential care facility. You may recall that this came before members at the end of 2020 for a change of use of what had then been a redundant family centre. So at this point in time, those two facilities are both using the same access. So the proposal is to improve accessibility by providing a new entrance. There you see on the Google aerial view the site with the residential care facility beyond it. And the existing pedestrian access is helpfully marked in blue, which goes through the site. And there are currently a couple of crossings by vehicles, which makes it relatively so at the moment, cars drive in here, and then in order to get to the residential care facility, they will cross the pedestrian path here, and then as vehicles come out to exit the school, they cross again. So here's the photographs. These show the current entrance to the site with a variety of boundary treatments. And then within the site, you can see there the blue access pedestrian routes and where the vehicles have to cross. And finally, here we see there's a bit of additional space in front of the building, where a minibus can park and bins can be accessed. And then this is the access through to the city. So the proposal will provide a safer pedestrian route with the instruction of separate access here, facility, and with a reordering of parking spaces. As explained in this report, there will be a loss of some parking spaces, but as explained, the provision will remain above the guidelines provided by the council parking standards, which relates to the number of full and part-time staff. Officers fully appreciate that although staff in part-time limit will be required to be on site at a similar time during the school day, so then there may be a requirement for parking. However, it's just that there are sustainable means of reaching the school, and that this would encourage more greater use of pedestrian facilities, and it's not considered that the loss of new parking spaces would outweigh the public benefit provided by the new watering. Just to highlight post separation between the school sites and the new vehicular access, see it in there indicating that's going to be to the new boundary fencing, and gates highlighted blue with a double gate, vehicular access for the school, and then vehicular access for the other side, and then pedestrian access to. There is a tree preservation order towards the front of the application site, but only one tree, which is of a lesser quality, is going to be removed. So the council's agricultural team are comfortable with that. There is a proposed ramp as part of the pedestrian access to ensure that everybody can access the school, and the materials are set out there for you on that slide. So in summary, the proposal will be a public benefit, rerouting the pedestrian access away from vehicle routes and providing a separate access for the new residential care facility. So the principle is acceptable within the urban areas recommended for everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. We have no further speakers on this item, and our first member is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's good that you have that slide. Well, thank you for the officer's presentation.
You've got the microphone.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, officer, for the presentation. Again, this is one to come to us because of the Council Association with this. And I was going to move straight to a proposal. Just before I do, could I just ask, parking spaces 13 and 14, are they going to be lost? I'm not sure how that works with the piece of land there. The parts behind them separating 16, 17, 13, 14.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. So the intention is that those will be used by members of staff who originally, the first on site, probably the last team. So it'll be managed by the school. The intention is that they would remain available.
Thank you. We come back to the chairman. That's a relief. I hadn't realised that, and I hadn't seen that. I thought we're moving apart, and if it's safe for children, suddenly we're going to have across between two lots of park cars. But okay, that explains that. I think, Madam Chairman, there's no objections to this. It's obviously put in place a safer route into school for the children, which is what we would all want. It's never a good idea to have children and vehicle movement in the same space, which is what they had before. And so I would propose that we go with the officer recommendation of the report and the conditions to say no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Gordon.
You will not be surprised, Madam Chairman, that I am familiar with this particular building, and I certainly welcome the new vehicular entrance, because in the past it has been not dangerous, but one has to be very careful. One still has to be careful. At least now it's made safer for the children that are there. I welcome the proposal has come. I quite willingly second it while I'm able.
I don't think you're going anywhere too soon. I have no other speakers. Just to check. No other speakers proposed and seconded to grant. Show of hands those in favour, please. Again, that's unanimous. So that's granted. Thank you for that. Item 6 on our agenda is urgent items, and you'll be pleased to know there are none. So can I thank everyone that has listened into this meeting remotely, and all those that are here in attendance in person, and all those behind the scenes who made it possible. I believe there's a lot of work involved in that. So thank you all very much. At 12:28, I shall close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.